Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here.
Mama's Well.
Yes, she is. Well, hello again, and welcome back. We are here today, and I have a special guest. And you know what? Let me remind everybody, this is Foster Care Awareness Month. I don't know if you knew that or not, but this is the month that we celebrate foster care, and we try to raise awareness about foster care. And so I thought I had the perfect guest. I do have the perfect guest for this. And I want to take us back to my tagline. And you've heard me say it every week, but unless you watch the first episode, you might not know what the heck I'm talking about. So I say that we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. And that came from actually a Sunday morning years ago. It was Father's Day, and our preacher was talking about his childhood. And his father was a prison warden, and he was sharing that there was some emotional lacking that went on in his home, and so he was calling that a gap. But he went on to say that it was in that gap that he really learned a lot about himself, and he now connects on a deeper level emotionally with his own kids. And it was through navigating that gap that he really came to understand things about himself and to become the father that he is today, and the friend and the husband. And so that's just stuck in my head for a lot of years. And I think about that in reference to foster care. I mean, if you've been in foster care any length of time at all, you know there's like a lot of gaps. I mean, we have gaps in a system. We have gaps in, well, first of all, it exists because there was a gap. And as foster parents, we stand in that gap. And so in honor of this month and in honor of you, I want to talk about some of those. And I have with me today a friend of mine, Amber Knowles. She is the founder and director of Fostering Family. Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure I say it right. I should know this because I'm on the board.
Yes.
But Amber, I met you a few years back and just recently joined the board, and I am blown away with all that you guys have done. And so I know that the heart and soul that you put into it came from recognizing a lot of gaps. Yeah. So that's what I want to talk about today, because Great. I think that, we can experience those gaps, and we can either get like sucked down into the vortex of horrible and possibly even quit, or we can try to find ways to either find the gifts in those gaps. And I think we do that by, we come up with solutions, whether they're within ourselves or finding resources. And so that's what I want to talk about today. But first, would you tell us just a little bit about your family and
Sure.
how you started this foster care adventure? Let's just call it that.
It is an adventure. That's a great way to put it. It's an adventure and a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So my husband and I started fostering we started the foster care kind of licensing process in 2014. When we started the licensing process, we had a 6-month-old little girl. When we finished and opened our home, she was a little over a year. Okay. But really, even kind of before we got married, we knew that adoption would likely be a part of our story. We both really felt strongly that we wanted to step into that. We had no idea how we would step into it. We didn't really know anything about it. And so we just really started pursuing different options, started thinking through it, started talking through it. And we really just wanted to care for our neighbors more than anything. We wanted to step in and, like you said, fill that gap. And so we started looking at foster care. We got connected with an agency and just really slowly started walking through that process. We opened our home in 2015. We had, I think we were open on a Monday, and we had a call on a Tuesday, and he was in our home on Thursday. Wow. So it was a very quick process. Our daughter went to bed one night and then woke up the next morning with another little boy in our home. So it was an adjustment for everyone. And since that time, we had another biological child. We actually closed our home because we had 3 very little kids at the time and wanted to wait until our kids were a little older so that we could take in older kids. And then we got a call in 2018 that the brother of our adopted son was going into foster care. And so we very unexpectedly took in a younger infant.
Okay.
So he was, our biological son was 8 months old at the time.
Okay.
And then we got a 3-month-old.
So you had 8 month, 3 month.
3 and 4-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
I think I've blocked out most of those days. I look back at pictures and I'm like, I don't even remember this. I think I blocked it out. It was a lot of hands on deck. It was our community stepping in. We had someone, either a nanny with me most of those days, and that was when Fostering Family was getting launched. I was sitting at a desk working on Fostering Family launch strategy planning, things like that, when I got the call that our son's brother was going into care. So it turned into, it turned quickly from what we want to launch in the first year to a 3-year plan. We thought it would slow down things, and it did to a certain degree, but the Lord still kind of moved everything forward in a way that we never expected. So.
Okay. So you are parenting 4 littles. Now, let's just stop right there, because that is, you get, that's one big thing right there, foster care. Like you don't necessarily know when, where, or what, or who, right? It's just, you get a call and the baby's coming. Okay. So, that would have been that. And you weren't even, your home wasn't even open at the time, right?
For the second. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now you mentioned having a nanny. Tell us about that.
Well, it's actually kind of an interesting story. So I have to take everyone back a little bit.
Yeah.
There was a girl that we love dearly, who came into our life when she was 19. This is prior to us. Actually, she ended up living with us when we had been married for 3 weeks. She was a part of our small group that we were leading at the time, and was really struggling. And she kind of came in and lived with us for a bit, tried to get on her feet. This was, 8 years ago. And
So you were
she's always
fostering before you were actually fostering.
in a way, yeah. Didn't really think about it in those terms, but she has continually been a part of our life, and stepped in when Josiah came. I was like calling her, like, I need some help. I need some help. Can you? And
you had
she's
an
in
8-month-old baby.
I had an 8-month-old baby, and now this 3-month-old that was coming in, and I was like, there's no way I can do this. And my husband was like, we can't do this. But I was like, we have to do this.
Yeah.
And so we ended up, after a lot of praying and a lot of crying on my part, and a lot of just really wrestling with what does this mean for our son, who is in our home? What does this mean for this child? Thinking through all of those different things. And we had a matter of hours to decide. The agency kept calling us saying, we want to place him tonight.
Yeah.
Can you make a decision? I'm like, you have just upended our lives. Can you give us a minute?
Yeah.
Which I understand it, but it's a lot to process in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So, our friend stepped in, and she's been at school at U of H, and so she was just wonderful and stepped in, and we had a couple of different people who we had on a rotation, so that I just was never fully alone in it.
I'm remembering back to when we first started this, and while I didn't have littles at the time, I didn't have any littles. My youngest was probably 11-ish. But I remember it was a Sunday morning, and we had already had one placement, and then the older sister had just, she had just been placed with us. So we went from 1 to 2, and she was almost 4, and there was a lot more trauma. There was a lot more, an older placement is different, where, a baby is a lot of hands-on, but then it's just 2 different kinds of things. But I remember just sitting on my couch going, I don't know if I can do it. Like, I don't know if I can do it, because while my boys were older, I mean, they still had needs, right? I still was a parent to 3 boys, and now all of a sudden 5. And my husband, you know, always wanting to be there and support and like find solution, right? He's a let's find a solution guy. I remember him pulling up his laptop, and he pulled up a spreadsheet, and he's like, listen, I've been thinking. He hadn't told me he'd been thinking, but I've been thinking, you know, there's like 5,000 at the time. I think there were like 5,000 kids in care in the state of Texas. And he started pulling up all these numbers that he had on a spreadsheet. And so he had been putting some work into this, and he's like, you know, that's not that many. If you think about like all the churches just in the Houston area, or, you know, if you just even just look at communities, leave churches out, right? But just communities, right? This 5,000 kids, like, we could handle all that if we all just work together. It's very dreamy, songwriter-ish of him. But he started like putting ideas in my head. We could get support. I could have support. Whereas to me, it was all just on my shoulders. The whole world was resting on my shoulders. Now, why I thought that I could carry the whole world, I don't know. But that brings me to this place, a huge gap, because you do need support. But you can't just call your best friend, Mary, at the time and say, could you help me out? You know, because there's all these, you know, hoops to jump through, right? Yeah. And so, anyway, obviously you had to do that with your help and your support. And so that's kind of where these conversations of where I initially met you is, because Kyle and I were going, how can we create some help, some support? And so anyway, so I think that's one of the huge, and you don't necessarily realize it until you get in it. Like, you don't realize that that's going to be an issue until you get in it. Now, I know they tell us at training to create a community, but you don't really know what that means.
Well, I actually hear sometimes from agencies, like I heard this just this week actually, where there are agencies that do say that, and then there are also sometimes, maybe it's just caseworkers that aren't really informed, but they're saying, hey, you don't need this many. We had this as well when we don't need this many babysitters, because that's a lot of paperwork for me to process. Yes. Can you just cool it for a little bit? Our agency, when we were starting the process, we knew we weren't going to be the only people doing this. We were hoping and praying that we may be stepping into this, but if we can do this with support around us, that will multiply, and that will replicate other families who will step into it willingly, because they see the amount of support that's around. And we always talk about that with different communities, saying, don't worry about recruitment, worry about support, because when families are very supported, they just multiply. And
you want to be a part of it, right?
Right. You want to step into it. Yeah. And if people are stepping into the life of a foster family and seeing, yes, how hard it is, but seeing how meaningful it is, people just want to get more involved. And so we don't really people talk about like recruiting new foster families. We need more foster families. We just need to tell people to do it. I don't think that is the best strategy for that. I think it's all about support. If we support our families really, really well, it will happen. And so for us, we stepped into foster care. They were saying at our agency, at our trainings, they would say, get to know these people that are next to you, because they're going to be your babysitters. And we were like, that does not make any sense. They live really far from us. And why would they take a night away when they could be going on a date night? They could be getting some rest. And so we went to our community and just said, we need to step into this. We need you to help us. And so we just did essentially a babysitting collaborative training in our own living room. I just brought in a CPR instructor and said, I'll bring all the paperwork, just step in. And so we had no idea really that this was abnormal, but we had like 25 babysitters. And then found out later, our caseworker was like, please stop doing this. Why are you sending me all of this paperwork? And we had to say, this is why we're doing this, because we want to be able to hand this group of babysitters over to the next family in our community who says they want to step in, and they don't have to do all of the same things. And so that's where the idea about doing a more agency, multi-agency streamlined process came to be. And then, of course, the model that we've seen through Austin and San Antonio as well.
I want to talk more about that. I had the same response because I didn't have 25. I had 10 or 12.
Yeah.
And my theory on that was, I had 2 girls. They would do much better if we could, even though they keeping them together sounds great too, but separating them gives that family time to really nurture. Yeah. You know what I mean? And make them feel special. So I didn't want to, and plus my friends, they're out of little children. They didn't know what to, they were like, they could handle 1, but you throw them in 2, we're in trouble. Yeah. So my theory was I need twice the babysitters, and I need to have plenty.
Yeah.
But I finally did understand one of the areas of concern with that, with the agencies, and not to spin off too much, but just to clarity is if they're a provider, all of that paperwork has to be renewed, right? So each one of those people have to have, that has to be checked on, because if they're in the file as a provider, but they don't have updated, then the agency is going to get nicked for it or whatever. So totally understand it, but also see the point of like, well, if you support these families, like who wouldn't want to be in that club, These people
and it needs to be
around.
the right people. You don't want to just get 25 people for the sake of 25 people.
Yes.
And 25 was probably too much. But I understand the agency's concern of like, why are 25 people taking care of your kids? Are you ever home?
Yeah.
Are you only going to date nights every night? But when you talk about actually, there are a lot of really good restaurants in Houston. But when you talk about like, the number of people who are in your life that can step in and support you when you're not doing foster care, for just a kind of normal family, you have both sets of grandparents for some people, not all, but that's 4 people sometimes. And then you add on your neighbor who may need to step in a bind, because they're really proximate to where you're at, or your sister, or a couple of babysitters, because not everyone can, are able, and their situations change. And, so you talk about, when you look at, your normal family, how many people do you typically have on your list to call, including your family? Because your family can't even step in unless they're trained. So that list gets pretty long, pretty fast. And so when you say like, hey, you can only have 3 people on this list, for a person with a larger family, or, 3 people for some people really works, and 3 people for another may not. So just having the flexibility of that has been hard. And I also get it from the agency perspective.
Yeah, I think that to me, that was one of the big glaring gaps right then, is that I was kind of alone in it. I didn't realize what I was stepping into. I didn't realize that just going up to a basketball game for my sons was going to be so challenging, and then there's a lot of, speaking of the gaps, there's a lot of, I was feeling a lot of shame about missing things for my boys. And so there's definitely, I like the way Fostering Family has stepped into that gap and helped. And so tell us a little bit, because we kind of breezed over it, but what is the Babysitting Collaborative? And I know you mentioned some other cities that we have this going on. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So going back, we kind of had this idea because of what had happened through our own story, just thinking through how do we make this accessible to more families, because we were talking to agencies and just doing some research and finding out that every agency that we talked to, they said the number of babysitters that foster families have is 0 to 1. And we were like, this is just that's not sustainable. This is why families quit fostering. It's
what do you mean it is 0 to 1? Say that.
So each family has 0 to 1 babysitters available.
Okay.
Every agency that we had talked to, which was about 5 or 6, said 0 to 1 babysitter per family. That's typically what we see. Every once in a while, someone will have more, but maybe 0 to 1. More agencies, I think, now are making it more of a requirement, because if you don't have anyone, you're getting tired really fast. Yeah. And so, we started looking into what could something like that look like? And around that exact time, I went to a conference that Fostering Hope Austin was putting on in Austin. And I met Julie Corey, and I learned a little bit about Fostering Hope. And I mean, I think I went up to her after she was speaking, and I was just like, I'm from Houston. I was pregnant with our, third kiddo, and probably really sweaty. And it was in like February, but I just feel like I was sweaty all the time, and very pregnant. And so I went up to her and just said, tell me about your organization, and does it exist in Houston? Because I've fostered and we adopted, and I've never seen anything like this. And so she kind of told me about it. I was really hoping that she would say, yeah, there's this organization in Houston and they're doing these things and you should just jump in and support it. And unfortunately, what she said was it doesn't really exist. There's some really great work happening in Houston, but there are some gaps.
Yeah.
And so step into it.
Yeah.
And so that started a longer conversation. We kept staying in touch, and I learned a little bit more about what something like that could look like. And one of the things that I loved about what Fostering Hope was doing, and I still love this, is that they are so collaborative in nature. It was like they were kind of a hub in the wheel, and they were bringing all of these different entities kind of together, and they were providing trauma training, which that was, I think, the first time I had heard anyone really talk about trauma, TBRI, and again, we had already adopted, and we were seeing some of these things, and I was like, there's hope for this. Yeah. There's hope
so your
for
agency
this trauma.
Didn't provide
it was there. Yeah. Like we had the Karen Purvis videos, but it was so, I think for so many families, when you're in pre-service training,
it's so much, isn't it?
There's so much that you're taking in, and you don't really have anything to attach it to. It's just because you don't have a kid, you don't have a context. And so you're getting good training, and it sticks, some of it sticks in there. But because, I mean, that's another, when we get to other gaps, I think that is a big gap, because we do say, continue to do this training, but after a kid is placed, there is this actual child with this actual trauma. And that's not where they're typically getting the training that they really need, because they got it, they just don't remember any of it.
And it's a whole year until they need it again.
Right. And it's just not as tangible as it could be. So that was really the first time I think I heard Julie talk about, more from like a very general overview of the neuroscience of like, there is actually hope for the effects of trauma to be healed. And I'm sure we heard that multiple times probably. But it was the first time because we had gone through it, and I was reminded of it, and I was like, we need to make sure that families know this.
You were experiencing a need, and you saw a need, and you began quickly as even pregnant as you were and sweating to start stepping in. Yes. And so, just like this is, I have not been to the babysitting. They call them collaboratives, right? Trainings. So it's basically, just to regurgitate it, it's like where several agencies have come together, because typically how it used to be is like, if you want to do respite for me and my agency, then there's this criteria. Yeah. And if you want to do respite, say I don't want to foster, but I just want to dip my toe in the water and try some respite. If I want to do respite for this person in a different agency, I have a totally different set of criteria.
So it's kind of the same. Yeah, there's some overlap. We don't make every agency have the exact same list of requirements, although most of them are very similar. Some of them have a little bit more, some of them have a little bit less. And so we kind of just made a sort of basic training platform. It's actually more than what a lot of agencies require. We do references. We do, of course, the background check and the fingerprints, but we do a medication training. We do transportation training. We do trauma-informed care. And some agencies don't require that for babysitters, or what some agencies call short-term care providers. So it goes up to 72 hours. And that's something that I think some families do get a little bit more confused, because the terms respite, babysitter, everyone calls it something different, which is difficult. It goes up to, so the training that we provide allows someone to step into babysitting for up to 72 hours. So respite takes it from 72 hours to 2 weeks. It doesn't do respite, but it goes up to that 72-hour mark. So it's not just like an hour. It kind of does a weekend, which a lot of the majority of families need that much.
That weekend,
Rarely more than that, but sometimes they do. So we don't require every agency to do the exact same thing. But we have coordinated in such a way that if you're a family that is licensed through one of 23 agencies that are a part of it, you can just send your family or your babysitter, your friend, your family member to our website, and then they just sign up, and we coordinate everything, and then including documentation,
So
doing
you
all
send
the
it
trainings.
off to the agency.
We do. So
that's
everything we
awesome.
use a portal, a documentation portal through Benti, which DePelchin actually uses too. And I think a couple of other agencies. So we have everything tracked through that. And then once they've done absolutely everything, they've done their CPR, we actually send it over to the agency, and it's in one PDF. So
awesome.
instead of the family, which we've heard,
yeah.
The family is trying to get social security cards.
So much
and
paperwork.
much paperwork. So the
made
agency's
myself
doing
more
that.
Work. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it either gets put on the caseworker to get all this stuff for all these families, or it gets put on the foster family, and they're trying to do a million things and dealing with all the documentation. And they're like, I need to get a security card for this person, which is hard anyway. And then, a driver's license and getting them to do all this stuff. And it just gets really convoluted.
Yeah.
So we have them send them a link, and they sign up, and we take it from there. And once it's all done, the caseworker gets a PDF with their entire packet. And then they just have to run the fingerprints.
So,
Yes.
should someone be listening that is in another city or state, and they're like, oh my gosh, we need this, can they contact you?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll make sure your contact's in the show notes.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Your email, because basically you were but you were a foster mom that had a gap.
Yeah.
And you needed to fill it.
Yeah.
And I was too. I didn't move in this. I had my own, I literally was chasing all kinds of paperwork. I had binders, and it was a mess.
There's enough paperwork for foster families to do.
Yeah.
And there's enough for caseworkers to do.
Yeah.
And so part of the reason why fostering family exists is to take some of that off where we can. We can't do everything. We can't license families. We can't do certain trainings, but we can take some of that off of the backs of caseworkers or families to be able to provide support in certain ways so that they can be freed up to really engage with those other things that they need.
That's fabulous. And this is all the first thing you have to do, foster families, is realize you need support. So we might need to backtrack. We've been talking about babysitting here, but that's super important. If you think that you're going to go at this as a lone ranger, even with just you and your partner or husband or whatever, however you're doing this, that doesn't work for long, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's exhausting.
Yeah, and it's isolating.
It's isolating. You're right.
It's hard. And so I think the tendency for most families who are really, that are really struggling is I think all of us, the tendency is to isolate away rather than to engage with people. Yeah. And so we see a lot of foster families who get into crisis, or as they're kind of moving further and further into crisis, they retreat further and further out.
And then what do? Eventually you're like, you're done, then I surrender. I can't do this anymore. Yeah. And that's obviously not the goal.
Right.
So that's a huge gap. A, you got to have support. B, creating that support, and it's a great resource. You're a great resource. So
one of the things I would also, I hope that we could probably put it in the notes, is we have a foster family profile form that I think has been pretty helpful for a lot of families. So one of the things that we noticed a lot was people would ask us, especially in those moments where we had just 2 infants at home, what can we do? We want to help. Yeah. We had like a little Amazon wish list for, some baby things that we still needed, and things that were specific to our kids that were coming into our home. And so we kind of sent that out. It was like, some extra baby wash and just little things like that. And so they were all over that. But a lot of times people would say, let me know how I can help you. And in my mind, I'm thinking, my dishes are piling up. My laundry is overflowing. I don't know what you mean by that. So there's kind of this awkwardness. Are you serious?
That's the question.
What can I take you up on right now? What would you be willing to do? And so I think that there is this kind of awkward interaction that happens when someone says, how can I help you? And in the moment you're just like, I don't know. But you need to think about it, and you need help, but you just don't know what to say. And so we created this profile form that really it's a bunch of questions that just says, how do you recharge? How do you feel most loved? What are your kids' favorite snacks? I mean, anything from, do you need babysitting? Do you have babysitters? Lots and lots of different things. What are your favorite sports teams? What are your favorite flowers? What are your favorite, different things like that? Is there an upcoming date when you're going to court and you need a meal sent over? And so it kind of gives handles to that, and it allows someone to, instead of just going up to someone and saying, how can I help you? And kind of just springing that on them, they can say, hey, can you just fill this out? You don't even have to fill all of it out, but if there's anything on this list that would be helpful for you, if you could fill it out and then just give it back to me when you get a second, that kind of gives them an opportunity to really think through some of the things. Because when you're kind of in crisis, I'm not even thinking about my favorite flowers or, for me, it was like, coffee, if you can drop off a coffee on my doorstep. And we would get that. Like someone would one of our friends would say, I know what coffee order you always get. And they would text me and say, hey, I know that you're busy. There's a coffee on your doorstep.
That's awesome.
And that for a mom who's just going, spinning, it can be really life-giving. Not the coffee. No, the coffee helps, thought. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But it's the thought of someone's in this with me. And it's something so small. So I would really just say, use something like that.
Well, and it also gives it puts your money where your mouth is. Like, instead of how can you help, how can I help you? You already know when you ask somebody that, you know what they're going to say. Oh, I'm okay. Right. But if you say, I'm picking up dinner and bringing it over, or fill this out, it's like, that's totally different than saying, how can I help you? It puts someone on the spot. They have to say something, but absolutely. I think that what you're saying is so powerful. You got to have a community, and asking for help was hard for me. It was very hard for me. And finally I kind of just had to surrender to, I'm either going to quit or I got to ask for help. And my husband helped me by saying, hey, people want to help, And
like you said before, the benefit of allowing someone in is not, there's of course the pride on our own part that keeps us from doing that, but letting someone in gives them an opportunity to see what this life is kind of about in some ways. But it gives them an opportunity to step into foster care. And that might be sometimes the catalyst for them stepping in a more meaningful way in the future.
It has been. Has it been in your circle? Yeah, it has been for our circle too. Several people that were respite providers, babysitters for us, are now foster and adoptive parents.
Right.
So, and would thank us for it. Hey, what do you go over that? Exactly. Okay. So big gap. I think that, that's important. And then you mentioned already, we were kind of going in the line of the trauma gap. And it sounds like you, like me, was like, I knew the word trauma. I had some, honestly, my definition of what trauma was then versus now is so different. And then just recognizing even more so, we have all experienced trauma. And that's one thing I talk about a lot on this podcast, is that my own trauma, maybe it is different than theirs, but it gets triggered by theirs in a big way. And so that's been really one of the catalysts for Mom as Well, is that my children have invited me into a deeper level of healing of my own self. And I'm thankful, and it's also very painful. So we've got to become aware of our own stuff first, I think, and then obviously so that we can help them. So providing, and also I think what you said, it's being talked about more now. I mean, we're starting to hear people talk about trauma-informed schools. We're starting to hear even trauma-informed medicine. I mean, we're hearing more about trauma. So what are some of the things that you're seeing, that you guys are doing at Fostering Family? And then also, what are some things that you've been able to be involved in as far as educating parents about trauma?
I mean, I would start off by saying I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner, and I had never known. I mean, I knew that there was stuff out there that there were certain modalities, but this is not something that we get in school. Even social workers, that we have a social worker on staff who said we did a little bit of like trauma focus. We knew what certain trauma things were. But as far as like real connecting principles, it's just, I didn't know anything about it until I stepped into foster care.
You know, that's ringing a bell for me. I had a conversation with a pediatric nurse, neurologist, a pediatric neurologist. Okay. A neurologist. That's a brain doctor, right? And she said that she was out of school and like doing some of her own therapeutic work when she discovered the ACEs, the ACEs study, right? Which is a much older study. I mean, wasn't presented to her in school, which is adverse childhood experiences, for anybody who doesn't know. But when you said you were what are you now? Tell me again. You're a nurse practitioner.
In pediatrics. And I worked in school-based healthcare and community health.
Okay.
And
you weren't trained in that.
We did have, I worked in community, with a community health organization that put full clinics in schools. And so I was on campus at a charter school as a nurse practitioner. And then I stepped out into more of like a management type role where we were putting new clinics into additional schools. And we worked with therapists and we had psychiatrists because we were in areas of the city where kids were impacted by trauma. And so I'm not saying that none of them knew about it.
Sure.
But as far as helping parents, like getting it all the way down to parents and connection, I think it was a lot of times it is still focused on the behavior of the child. And so there are a lot of diagnoses and there's a lot of medications, and I'm not opposed to either one of those. But it is, sometimes we're kind of missing what they need most, in my opinion.
Well, we might be taking into account the role that trauma plays in those things. And
and we know that trauma that happens in relationship gets healed in relationship. And so we have to really make sure that connection piece is still happening despite, the medication or the diagnosis or whatever it is that needs, that we're looking at their behavior, but we're also looking at it from the lens of, the trauma that has happened in a relationship and how they can heal through connection. Because I think that's a harder thing to do, because talking through interpersonal relationships, it requires talking with parents and families and really getting to their trauma. And that is something that I think most therapists and, most even like psychiatrists just don't know how to do. And they're that's not really their job description. And so the question becomes, how do we get that for them? If we know that is true, that trauma that happens in a relationship gets healed in relationship, then how do we start to really bring families to healing? I think that there's a big gap.
Big gap
there. Yes.
Big gap. So ideas, what are your ideas?
One thing that we are working on is focusing on the areas of the city. So we do what's called the Riverside Project, is a kind of collaborative initiative here in Houston that works to get churches and communities working together in their area of the city. So we've broken kind of our county down into 12 areas, and we're focusing each one at a time on what are the gaps here. So we have big gaps in our city, but we have sort of specific gaps in different parts of the city. And so we've started in some of the areas where most foster families are, which is kind of the north side of Houston. And so in particular, every one of those areas has told us our foster families are saying they need counseling for themselves and they need counseling for their kids, and they can't find anyone who can help them through the lens of this trauma. We're taking them to this therapist or that therapist, and we're not getting anywhere. And so there are a few around Houston that we are seeing really good outcomes with, but there's just not enough of them to go around.
Right.
And so we have in the fall planned a TBRI for caregivers package that's going to be specific for professionals. So educators can go and get those principles.
That's great.
Therapists, psychiatrists, anyone who's interested, we're offering that to them in kind of the north side of Houston. So I think a lot of it is getting access to those types of things, helping to provide access to that type of training and resources. Yeah. So books on it and helping them to really just be able to get that stuff in their hands so that they can implement it in their practice. And we're not necessarily saying don't do any of the things that you've been doing your whole career. It's just how can you add on this missing link that we see a lot, which is that connection piece. And how can we help you to get what you need to be able
I like
to fill
that we're going alongside people who, and just offering a hand, just, I think that's it has been a very big gap for me. I've had access to trauma training, whether I, buy it online, different, people that I subscribe to. I might watch, virtual conferences or, I've gone through Empowered to Connect a couple of times. And then, of course, our agency offers a TBRI training. I did Anna Valdez training and really enjoyed her stuff. And so there are trainings out there. Yeah. And I think we're going to start to see more and more and more and more. But if I could say one thing to foster parents, it really makes a difference. Like it really, really makes a difference. And because our tools, the tools in my parenting toolbox that I had are the same tools my parents used. And while I'm a wonderful person and all, I mean, there was some gaps, and those tools that I've, tried to use with my boys and have used with my boys, some more successfully than others, they're not as effective with my girls. So I've had to learn new stuff, and there's no shame in that. Like, it's actually beautiful to come up with new ways of new lenses.
Yeah. And for a kid who's come from a background of potentially neglect or abuse, things have to be done a little bit differently because you're having to go back and they're having to relearn certain things. And again, like you said, your trauma comes in to play. And so how do we deal with that? And I would say as well, one of the biggest gaps that we're seeing too is real in-person coaching. It's almost non-existent, but it is so helpful because you can go to all the trainings, and I've seen families who have gone to all the trainings and all the trainings and gone multiple times. But when you get in it and you've got to use this tool, but your own trauma is just like it doesn't have to be your own trauma. Like for me, it's chaos. I really struggle, and I have 3 boys who are very, I have 3 boys and a girl, and it is chaotic. I struggle with the chaos. I am a person who is deeply wired to create order from chaos, and I cannot. It's very hard for me. So when things start to get really ramped up, it is very hard for me to sort of stay calm in those moments. And so I would love to have some coaching in the moment, but that, especially for more specialized kids with complex needs, that is the only, I wouldn't say the only thing, but that is the thing that's making a really big difference for families. And when we talk about gaps, that is a big one in probably every city. Kids who have complex needs, particular kids who are older, they need people who can step into their life and make a meaningful impact and bring them into their homes. But that's not going to be successful unless we have really hands-on intervention and training to help them in the moment.
I think that, when you talk about, it doesn't even have to be, it's things like rejection or, like you said, chaos. And what you said was very profound. I'm going, is that me too? But chaos is hard for me too. And maybe I love what you said. You said, I'm a person that longs to put order to chaos. Is that what you said? Something like that was really good. And I can tell that about you from the work that you've done with fostering family. But I can see, God made us a certain way, right? But somehow we've got to learn to maneuver in there because he also made us their parents.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I can't just, check out with a puzzle or something.
No, I totally get it. But there is, it's definitely, that's why I always say my kids are my greatest teachers. They bring me to the most painful places where I'm forced to either, grow up emotionally, right? Grow up, heal, or I guess I could check out, but I hadn't done that yet, and I don't plan to. So I'm going to have to stick with the whole keep growing. So I would just say that is a gap that our children, that's what they come with.
Yeah.
That's why we're there. And so locating support. And there is a lot of stuff out there available to foster parents for free or very, very limited dollars. Wouldn't you say? I think that's the case.
Yeah. Most of them, it may cost a little bit here and there, but we're happy to point people towards different types of training.
Yeah. Okay. Those are biggies, the gaps. We've got a lot. You mentioned one more earlier. Did you say? Maybe it was just locating. We were kind of going to that locating actual therapist, right? And you guys have done something. I was looking at your website recently, and I saw, it seemed like you had a map on there. Talk about that, because I thought that was pretty powerful.
So we've built, it's local to Houston, but we've built a resource page that really focuses on kind of the holistic needs of kids in care. So whether they're in a family or they're in a group home situation, there's kind of a diagram. And this kind of, I think, comes from my medical background and wanting to make sure that kids are being cared for from a full spectrum of ways and meeting their needs on a more holistic level. So we know that kids need permanency, and there are a lot of people working towards permanency. So there's like judges and agencies and all of those people who want permanency for kids. But sometimes we forget that they have educational needs. And so we have a whole part of our resource page that has all of the foster care liaisons in the school districts. So if there's a need that you have as a foster parent and you need someone within the school district that can advocate for your child, there's someone in every school district that is supposed to. They may not know that it's their job description, but there's at least somebody that's designated in every school district in Houston, in the state actually, that can step in and help you navigate that. So we have all of them listed. We have pediatrician foster care clinics here, and we're trying to grow that as well. And then we have behavioral and emotional resources. So there are, trauma-informed therapists, psychiatrists, crisis intervention organizations, and there's a list of podcasts and books and things like that are all trauma-informed and kind of vetted pretty closely. And then we also have a community support arm, which is a lot of what we've been talking about today. Where are the support groups located for foster and adoptive kinship families in Houston? Where are parent night outs, which none of them are really happening right now because of COVID. And then, what churches and faith communities are engaged with this, and where can they step in? And then where can I get tangible needs met? So all of the foster care closets, all of that is kind of listed on a map, so you can kind of see where you are.
That's another thing that we should talk about is if you don't know what a foster care closet is, or sometimes they're called Moses closets. Is there any other name they use?
Yeah, I don't love the term foster closet because it's for people who aren't in foster care. It's like, do they keep foster kids there? Like, someone actually asked me that. They were like, "What's a foster closet?" They were very concerned. And I'm like, "Oh, that doesn't sound right."
I actually always hear them called Moses closets. Why is that?
I don't know where it comes from. I think there might be one actual Moses closet, and then other people have jumped into that. I don't know where it comes from.
But essentially, what this is, and I think they're in. This is not just for our area. These are all over. But when you get a placement, this has been my experience, you can take your placement paperwork to this facility, and they have just different facilities have different things, but the ones that I participated in have diapers and formula and pack and plays and car seats and high chairs and clothes of every size. And the people that work there are extremely kind and welcoming and want to help you. I've even had people call me back and say, "Hey, this booster seat came in," or whatever, I thought of you. And so I think that's another resource because you have one placement that may stay there for 6 weeks, and maybe that's a 2-year-old boy, and then 2 days later Or you get a call like you did and you have a 3-month-old baby. It's a girl, and so having these resources available to us, I mean, some things you can keep and use. And the great thing about these closets is once you're done, you can take a tub, and as long as it looks nice and it's clean, you take it back.
Yeah.
And it just it's really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, those are really great. And we've seen, there's several around the city, and we've seen that they're very well resourcing foster families. And we've been talking with a lot of them to make sure, because you know, kinship families or relative caregivers, when a child goes into the foster care system and they get placed with an aunt, or they get placed with a grandparent, they don't always see themselves as foster families. And so they don't know that those resources are available to them, but they can be.
Right.
So
No,
we've
I
been
think
talking
they
with
are
some
for
of them.
sure available. Yeah.
To make sure that those closets know, hey, there's this group of families out there.
Yeah.
But just talking about gaps, one of the things that we've noticed that there is a big lack of is resources for biological families in that regard. And so we have actually, this is more of a new thing that we're launching right now. We've been partnering with Care Portal, which is all over the country.
Okay, tell us what Care Portal, because if it's all over the country,
it's all over the
I
country.
definitely want everybody to understand what that is.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Care Portal is a technology platform that brings the needs of vulnerable families to churches in the community.
So is it faith-based?
It is faith-based, but I believe it can be churches, but other organizations can also step in to meet needs as well.
Okay.
And so essentially what happens through this platform is caseworkers can enter the needs of their families that they're interacting with, and then it gets put into a portal. They kind of put it into a portal. My family needs groceries this week, or this family needs a bed with a mattress, or whatever it is. And it goes into this platform, and then any churches that are in their zip code who are signed up on Care Portal are able to meet that need in real time and say, yes, I can meet that need. And then they get to know the family and they drop it off.
Wow.
So it doesn't even have to go through the caseworker. It can, sometimes it does, but for the most part, the goal is that parent or that family that has a tangible need can get the need met. But then there's an offer of community if they want it, to say, hey, we can meet that need. Also, we know this ministry, or we know this, we have
a babysitting collaborative.
We can meet these other needs as they come up too. So we can be a resource to you for more long-term support.
So your caseworker has to do it. So you need to, and I mean, my experience has been sometimes we have to educate our caseworkers on something. Like if I heard this, I'd be like, what? I need to know what this is. So how would they do it?
That's where the thing is. So because there are so many closets, when we started working with Care Portal, we really started looking at the city of Houston and seeing it can be used in a lot of different ways. And in a lot of cities, it's used for, conservatorship or, caseworkers that are in with foster families. And in other parts of the city or parts of the state or the country, it looks different. And so we started really looking at kind of taking an inventory of where we felt like the need really was in Houston. And because we have so many closets and we have the Bear office, there are lots of different things that foster families have available to them. But on the upstream side, we talk a lot about like upstream, downstream. On the upstream side of things, where if we talk about prevention and early intervention so that kids don't have to go into foster care, biological families typically don't have access to these types of things. And so we really started thinking through, if in launching Care Portal, we want it to first at least be available to biological families.
Right.
And so we are launching it. We're launching it with investigative caseworkers. We're launching it with family-based safety services, which is kind of that program right before removal doesn't have to happen yet. We're hoping it doesn't, but we're kind of going down that road, and we need to help you get on your feet. So those caseworkers will be putting in needs, and then kinship or relative caregivers will be putting in those needs. So right now we're directing caseworkers that are caring for foster families to continue using foster closets and using the Bear office, but we really want to get...
What's the Bear office? I'm not sure. I know
It's
what
Be
that
a
is.
Resource. It's here in Houston.
Okay.
I think they call them like rainbow rooms. It's kind of, it's off of like TC Jester in the Houston area.
It's a resource?
It's just a resource closet. They have to go through their caseworkers. So they have a big warehouse. It's kind of like a large closet, but caseworkers can get
needs if
needs
they need.
met for their families.
So if you're listening, if there's somebody listening and they're a kinship placement, or they're just struggling in any way, they could reach out to their caseworker. And how would they educate their caseworker on Care Portal? Is it careportal.com?
I mean, yeah, I can put, or you can,
Yeah.
I guess I can give you the, like a video or the
Yeah.
website for Care Portal just to find out more about it.
Yeah.
We're in the process of launching it. So we are about to start training caseworkers 1 unit at a time.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that there are enough churches in our community who are able to step
meet
in
those needs.
before we
Okay.
get them meeting, putting needs in. And
Yeah.
then we're going to kind of have to look at the supply and demand.
But you said
over
it's
time.
something that's not just local. It's okay.
They're doing it in other cities. So I would
okay.
definitely look. You can go to the website
Yeah.
and there are, you can look to see where Care Portal is,
Okay.
what's happening in your city, if there
Yeah.
is,
That's
if
great.
it's actually being
I'm
used.
envisioning right now that there is another Amber Knowles listening who's saying, man, there are some serious gaps in this thing I signed up for, and that they're going to be calling you, just like you went to Julie Corey and said, Julie, I need some help, and I think you got something going on here. I'm envisioning that this is going to happen with other people listening, and they're saying, I can do this. If she could do this, I can do this.
It's true.
And wouldn't that be fantastic?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm believing.
I think that's the sort of the point,
Mm-hmm.
Stepping in, recognizing that we don't have all it take or all that it takes. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
the ability to meet every need. We have to do it together. And I know that sounds so cliche, with the whole like better together.
Yeah.
But it really, we know we can't do it on our own.
Right.
There's no family that can figure this out. There's
Yeah.
no person that can figure this out. And so stepping into those gaps, I didn't realize that there was so much willingness to work together in the foster care system in Houston until we stepped into it. People were telling me early on, Houston is, people don't work together there. People are very territorial. They like to stick to their lane. And it might have been happening at the beginning, but that hasn't been the case. And I don't know if it's just stepping in and being the crazy person and just saying, hey, we're going to work together. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
But I think people want to. I
Yeah.
think they recognize that,
Yeah.
especially in today's world, that we kind of have to do it together.
Yeah,
So
I do. And I, it's only been since 2015 when we were licensed. So, in the grand scheme of things, not that long. But what I've seen from that point and now I'm really in it. Like I hear and see a lot of things that are going on. It's a huge, it's like leap years, and it's exciting.
it really is.
It's exciting. So, anything else? I mean, I don't want to, foster parents don't have a long time to listen to podcasts. They get half of this.
Yeah.
So hopefully they got the good half.
I hope so.
But is there anything else that you would want to add to that? I definitely, we're going to put fostering family website. I want to put the Care Portal, you said video or something.
Yeah.
Everything we talked about, I'll go back and listen, and we'll make sure that we get it
Yeah.
in the show notes, and then how to contact you, because I know there's like some other Amber Knowles listening. I know it. You're going to
That's
get,
great.
wouldn't that be great?
That would be
That's
great.
what I'm thinking this whole podcast is for. It's going to be spawning off all these different cities.
We need it. I
supporting.
think we need people,
Yeah.
drawing people
I'm
together.
really, really, really proud to be a part, and it's a teeny tiny part, but to see what's going on in our city, and I'm encouraged because I hear other things that are going on. CASA having a train in Montgomery County, having a TBRI training room where they can bring in families and do what you said, hands-on coaching. Like, that is exciting, and a vision that the whole entire county would be trauma informed, schools, everything, law enforcement, all of it. That's like so exciting.
Yeah. I think we need it,
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen a lot of division over the last, couple of years, but especially in the last 2 years,
Yeah.
there's just there's a whole lot of division and a lot of room for
Coming together.
and
Yeah.
meeting real needs in real
Yeah.
time.
And what better purpose to come together for than vulnerable children who are completely powerless and need someone to stand for them.
And
So-
I really think it's going to have enormous dividends.
Oh.
I really think if we are able to focus on vulnerable children and families, because we talk about, the way that this river works, foster care is connected to so many social issues, homelessness and poverty and trafficking and all of those things. And so if we can truly make foster care, the system or whatever you want to call it, a place where kids can thrive and where families can heal, and we can disrupt some of that, and we get to see changes in homelessness.
Yeah.
We see changes in incarceration. We see racial reconciliation, and communities coming together in ways that, we don't necessarily see on the news right now. And and I think it just starts by stepping in.
Yeah.
And
well, we're talking about loving people.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. And I mean, I don't care what religion, it's religion aside. I mean, everyone can pretty much come together on love people. You know what I mean?
Be a good neighbor.
Love people. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. And so I'm proud to be a part of it. I am grateful for everything you're doing. And I just want to encourage foster parents, right? Because this is a great time to step in. Yeah. And if you can't step in as a foster parent, totally get that. But step in as a babysitter. Step in as a coffee bringer. A clothes washer, right? Yes. All these different things. And
those are
what
the best.
Amazing feeling that you get when you give. Yep. And so thanks, Amber.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
thanks
thank you. You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thanks for joining us again today. I hope that you were encouraged. I hope that you were inspired. I hope that leaves you like questioning, and like, I was at a place that time I talked about with my husband pulling up the spreadsheet. I was a place of defeat, and he was at a place of solution. And so I hope like today kind of stirs that solution juice in you, if that's something, like you're looking for solutions, because there are solutions. I mean, as my favorite, my Adele Faber, I talk about her when my boys were little. She says, when problems arise, we don't blame, we look for solution. And so that's what we're doing. We're looking for solutions. And so foster care needs solutions, and it needs you. So don't forget, subscribe, share the podcast. This is how we spread good word, good information and love. And that's what we're trying to do. Be good to yourself, and that will make you a better parent. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Mama's well.
Yes, she is.